Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. We've had a little break, during which time I got to do some traveling to the West Coast to hang out with my oldest son, who's living over there for now. And equally fun and importantly, I got to focus on the back end of the business where I've been completely restructuring things, really refining and simplifying this work that I share with you so that it can best work for you, so that it can really support you the most. And during this time, what's become so clear to me is that there's one core ability that really underlies everything that I teach. Really, it's the core thing that every positive shift comes back to for HSPs in their relationships. But even though it's been infused into pretty much every single episode of this podcast, I've never actually done an episode with it as the title, with it as the prime feature. But today is the day. So we're going to talk about it now because it's one of the most essential things HSPs in relationships can learn. And after many years of doing this work and learning so much, as I've guided so many HSPs into feeling better within themselves and in their marriages, I've been taking a lot of time lately to really simplify and streamline my processes to serve you best. And I want to start off this sort of new era in my work by highlighting the most powerful thing that you can do. The master skill that helps HSPs not only feel steadier and better within themselves, but to create much more secure, loving, connected relationships with their sweeties. And that is to develop emotional agency. And here's why it's so important. Without emotional agency, hard emotions tend to take over in us as HSPs, like overwhelm, shutdown, hurt, rejection, irritation, and reactivity. And it will genuinely feel like other people or circumstances in your life are causing those feelings, that emotional state. So it'll feel like your partner or your kids or your job are the reason you feel so bad. And it will feel like getting out of these feelings depends on your partner showing up differently or something else outside of you changing. More simply put, when you don't have emotional agency, you'll tend to find yourself getting swept into feelings of overwhelm, reactivity, shutdown, hurt, rejection, and really any and all hard feelings. And you're likely to feel a fair amount of relationship tension and hardship because of all of that. And the key part is you won't feel you have much control over it. It will feel like other people or things in the world are the reason you feel this way. So here's an example of what this could look like. Say you're going on a date night with your spouse and he's distracted by other people in the restaurant, or maybe he's replying to a text or two, and suddenly your body tightens and your mind starts going, he doesn't care, something's off, did I do something wrong? Right? Your mind starts kind of spinning, and now you're anxious, or you feel hurt and you're a little shut down, or you're irritated. And without even realizing it, your emotional state is now completely dependent on him. The thing is, if this feels familiar at all, it's rarely just a one-off moment. It's actually a pattern that so many of us have. It's how most of us have been operating emotionally in general without realizing it. And that pattern of operating has a name. And I've actually made a full episode on this. It's called emotional delegation, or I've also called it emotional outsourcing. And again, it's how most people are living instead of with emotional agency. So if you want to deep dive into emotional delegation, go listen to episode 192. But if you just want a quick sense of if you might be falling into this, which most people are, then I'm going to share a bit now. But assume that you are, because honestly, we've pretty much all been taught that our emotions come from what happens outside of us and that they depend on what other people do or say or don't say. And this is largely how we've been taught to relate to emotion in our modern culture. And in our intimate relationships, it really becomes more emphasized. So most people are unknowingly relying on their partner or their circumstances to determine how they feel most of the time. So when your partner wakes up in the morning, for example, and pulls you into a loving snuggle, you feel happy, you feel loved, you feel special. But when he's distant or he hits the alarm and quickly jumps out of bed with no acknowledging you, you feel a little hurt or just not special to him. If he gets reactive at something you say, you feel angry or triggered. Or you shut down, feeling hurt and misunderstood. Or more subtly, if he's just acting aloof and unengaged, you also feel aloof and distant. For me, in my first marriage, this was definitely part of my emotional pattern. So this often looked like when my husband was quiet and spacey instead of loving and attentive, I'd feel hurt and unloved and disconnected. So a huge sign that you, like most of us, have this emotional delegation pattern is if you ever think, I feel XYZ because he did XYZ, or he makes me feel, or he made me feel. So for example, I feel hurt because he forgot XYZ, or I feel happy because he brought me flowers, or he makes me feel secure, or he makes me feel rejected. That is straight up emotional delegation. The thing is, when any of this is happening, it means your emotional life is not in your hands. You've placed it in your partner's hands instead. And to be clear, this never means you're bad or that anything is wrong with you. The truth is, it's not your fault that you have this pattern. Part of this just comes from normal human wiring, and part of it is amplified by high sensitivity. And on top of that, most of us were never taught another way. In fact, we were actively taught to emotionally delegate all of our lives. So again, listen to episode 192 for more on all of this if you're interested. But of course you emotionally delegate, right? Of course you do. That's normal for humans right now. But even though it's understandable, it still leaves you deeply disempowered, especially when it's happening in your marriage. Because it's depending on a very unreliable source for your emotional well-being. Another human who is also emotionally outsourcing much of the time, who also has emotional patterns that are difficult. So you cannot rely on him or your partner as a steady source of safety, love, worthiness, and feeling good. When that's how your emotional world is working, what happens is you're going to end up in this exhausting loop of reacting and overanalyzing and needing reassurance and trying to finally feel okay through your relationship and trying to get your partner to be certain ways, but never fully getting there. And of course, it feels confusing and painful, even when there's lots of love there underneath it all. So over time, you tend to feel worse and worse, more and more frustrated and disappointed and like something's wrong with your marriage. But the truth is, you just never learned how to have emotional agency. This is the skill that changes all of that. So take a moment and think about what it would look like if your emotional state didn't depend on your partner, their words or actions. What if you had a deep steadiness inside yourself you could return to, and you trusted you could always support yourself into feeling how you want to feel? That is emotional agency. So let's define it a little bit more clearly now. Emotional agency is the ability to guide your emotional experience out of painful or reactive states and into states that support safety and connection and love. And of course, self-trust as well. instead of depending on other people or circumstances to create those feelings for you. And this is something you can actually get good at. It's not something that you either have or you don't have. Like, it's not your personality. It's a skill, something you learn and develop intentionally, something you grow on purpose. And really, it comes down to 3 core abilities, 3 things you need to be able to do. And you've heard me talking about these before if you've been following the podcast or on my email list. So here they are. The first one is being able to stay on your own side with trust and love. I've also called this being able to love and believe in yourself, your sensitivity and all. So when something hard happens, like in your life or in your relationship, or even when you simply want something more, you don't turn against yourself. You stay with yourself. You trust your experience. You support yourself. You're compassionate and encouraging, and you don't abandon yourself in order to manage someone else. Really, you're a zone of love and safety for yourself, so that advocating for yourself and going after what you want feel easy and natural. The second thing is being able to move through and out of hard emotions without getting stuck in them. So that might look like when you feel hurt or overwhelmed or triggered, you don't spiral in it for hours or days. And you also don't just shut it down and squash it and turn away from it. You know how to meet it instead in a way that allows it to move, so it passes fairly quickly instead of taking over. And the third thing is being able to intentionally create the feelings that build connection, like safety, security, and love, so that instead of waiting for your partner to create those feelings for you through what they do or say, you know how to access and build those feelings for yourself, within yourself, so that when you show up, you're already coming from warmth and openness and steadiness, and that naturally creates more of all of that between you and your partner. So that is emotional agency, you becoming the source of your emotional stability and happiness. And when you have that, everything in your relationship starts to change for the better. What happens then is that your relationship, instead of being the place you use to try to feel okay, rather than a place you try to control in order to manage your own feelings, which kind of happens because we tend to control our partner in order to control our feelings. Instead of that, your relationship becomes something you just get to enjoy, like a cherry on top of your ice cream sundae. It's not your primary source of joy. You already have that right here, steady and strong inside you. But it becomes an additional joy that just adds to your life. In other words, you become the source of your well-being, and your relationship becomes the bonus, this beautiful extra light in your life that you just get to enjoy. And man, does that make your relationship so much more fun and full of ease and lightness and really love. The kind of love that feels really joyful. Now, here's the big truth about all this, and this is where a lot of people get stuck. You can't just decide to do these things and suddenly be able to do them. You can't just say, I'm going to stay on my own side, or I'm not going to get stuck in my hard emotions, or I'm going to feel more love and connection, and have it actually work in the moments that really matter. Because those aren't just intellectual decisions, right? And you can't force them through willpower. Those 3 things are capacities. They're capabilities. And those capacities are built by learning how to work with your internal system, your mind, body, heart system, and learning how to do that on 3 core levels of your mind, body, heart system. So what I just shared, those 3 things, those are the outcomes. That's what you need to do. But this, what I'm about to share, is how you actually build those capacities. So there are 3 core layers to your mind, body, heart system. And you need to learn how to work with all of them to have emotional agency. The first one is your nervous system. And that's kind of really like your body, right? Your nervous system This is where safety lives in your body. This is what determines whether you feel calm or overwhelmed, open or shut down, reactive or steady. The next level is your mind, and working with that mind, working with your thoughts, your thinking, which is constantly shaping your emotional experience, whether you realize it or not. So we want to work with that mind layer and learn how to guide it, to steward it. And the third layer is that sort of layer of self-worth, which we could say lives in your heart. Really, the health of your emotional heart is what determines how you relate to yourself, whether you're on your own side with love and compassion and confidence, or whether you're turning against yourself and shrinking and feeling small and insufficient. So working with and learning to guide ourselves skillfully in these three layers really is the foundational emotional trifecta for HSPs to have great relationships. And that's when those three abilities that I talked about earlier become real, become very doable. In other words, that's when the three pieces of emotional agency click. I like to use an analogy of a computer to help this make sense, because I know that what I just said might feel a little abstract. So think of your mind and your body and your heart system like a computer system, like they're a computer. So you don't need to know everything about how a computer is wired in order to use it, right? But you do need to understand how to operate it, how to work with it if you want that computer to help you in your life, to support your life. And once you do, once you learn how to work with it, you have such an amazing capability, such an amazing tool right at your fingertips that can do so much for you in your life. I mean, can you imagine having a computer at your disposal and not knowing how to operate it on a basic level? You'd be missing out on so much ease, on so much capability. And this is exactly how it is with our own internal systems. Because this internal system, this mind, body, heart system of yours, it shapes so much. How you communicate, how you handle conflict, how connected you feel, how in love you feel in your relationship. And it even deeply influences how your partner responds to you. So you want to know how to use it on all of these levels. And again, you don't need to know every detail about how it works. You just need to learn how to operate it on a basic level. And that's what emotional agency is once you've learned that at a basic level. So here's the possibly hard but loving truth, one that made such a huge difference in my own life when I embraced it. Highly sensitive people like you and I, we need to learn how to work with and support our systems on these three levels more than non-HSPs do. We need emotional agency more because, as you know, sensitivity does amplify everything. Our feelings are stronger. We get to overwhelm and reactivity and really all the hard feelings quicker. And without emotional agency skills, it all lasts longer and takes over more. But with emotional agency skills, our sensitivity actually helps us have more depth, more connection, more capability in relationships than non-HSPs. And that's awesome for us because we tend to love all of that. So I really don't think of this as a disadvantage, this need to have emotional agency, this need to have more emotional skills. It's not a disadvantage. It just means we HSPs need the right tools. And this is actually why I've restructured how I support you. Because after years of doing this work and walking so many highly sensitive women through their relationships to great relationships, I've seen that it really isn't just one skill you need. It's a foundation, a trifecta of three foundational emotional capacities that make up emotional agency, and then a deeper layer of relational work built on top of that. So now there's a clear path. I've built it for you. The first step is Foundations of Emotional Well-Being for HSPs. That's my program where you learn how to regulate your nervous system, guide your mind, your thinking, and build real self-worth in 3 gentle phases. So you actually have the full skill set of emotional agency and you live it in your daily life. And from there, for when you want to go deeper into your relationship, into real connection and real intimacy and real mutual supportiveness and real transformation together, that's where Sanctuary 1-to-1 comes in. Because the truth is, the goal isn't just to feel emotionally safe and steady and empowered, which is what emotional agency gives you. And that's what you develop in Foundations of Emotional Well-Being. The goal is more laughter, more playfulness, more attraction and affection and mutual supportiveness and respect and joy naturally woven into your relationship, right? And really a deeper sense of being truly met and meeting each other. So depending on where you are, you can begin in the way that feels right to you. You can start with Foundations of Emotional Well-Being on its own, which you can now start anytime, even today, and build that inner steadiness and emotional agency first. Or if you already know you're ready for the full journey, you can step into both Foundations of Emotional Well-Being and Marriage Sanctuary 1-to-1 together and begin moving from inner security into a deeply connected, thriving relationship. So I'll put the link in the show notes, or you can also just head over to HSPmarriagecoaching.com and you can check out the Start Here button. But before we say goodbye today, I want to quickly share where we're heading next because this matters. Over the next couple of episodes, I'm going to walk you through these layers more deeply so you can start to understand what's been happening inside of you and why these layers are so important and what happens when one of these areas isn't as strong or supported in you. Because insight really does help, and that's what you get a lot of here on the podcast. But I do want to be clear that it's not the same as having the skills to really shift things in real time in your day-to-day life. And that's the piece that most women are missing. But in the next episode, you'll get some more insight. We're going to start with something so many highly sensitive women experience in love. And that is why it's so easy to doubt yourself and why it hurts as much as it does. And then in the episode after that, we're going to look at why so much of what you've tried has possibly helped some, but hasn't fully created lasting change and what actually does. So do tune in for those episodes. But if there's one thing that I really want you to take away from today, it is this. You do not have to keep living in emotional outsourcing, where your inner state is constantly shaped by what's happening around you or in your relationship. There is a different and easier way to live. And that way begins with developing emotional agency. This is something you can absolutely learn. In fact, many women are learning it right now in Foundations of Emotional Well-Being. So if you're ready to start building that into your real daily life, that's exactly what Foundations of Emotional Well-Being is here for. It gives you the support and the structure and the guidance to actually really develop these skills so that you can feel steady and grounded and secure within yourself, no matter what's happening around you. So learn more about it and your starting options at the description in the show notes, or again, you can head to hspmarriagecoaching.com and click the Start Here button in the menu. All right, my friends, be oh so well.